Greetings YouTube. Today we're looking at the Canon, a whirligig, whirligig tour of the beautiful basics of science. I don't know if whirligig was the proper term to use here. Whirligig to me denotes more random aspects to its movement. Whirligigs aren't known for direct paths that lead from A to B, but that's just my interpretation, I guess. This was written by Natalie Angier, author of Woman and Intimate Geography. Let me see if we got any useful blurb. Oh, Dawkins did a blurb on the back, if that means anything to you. Every sentence sparse with wit and charm, but there's a passion in there too, and it will adds up to an intoxicating cocktail of fine science writing. I didn't know he was on the back of there. It kind of makes me depressed. I don't much like Dawkins. If Dawkins stayed in his lane, I might be able to tolerate Dawkins more, but he's got a really severe case of both engineering's disease and social conservatism. It's a very dangerous, toxic mix. So I read this because it was going to be a relative fast 260-page overview of basic science concepts. And while I have read in depth farther than any of the things covered in here, or the depth she's covered into, it's nice sometimes to see other perspectives. It's taken me sometimes years to find the right author to really grasp a topic, even though I may have read it 2 or 3 times prior to that. I can't say that she brought any massive insights to me, but she did bring one which I think is very important. So the topics, the book's going from physics to chemistry to biology. Of course, that also covers, evolution. And then it goes into astronomy. So it's, basic science, what we consider hard science, although chemistry is not that hard. And they're subcategories, so it touches on biotechnology and things like that. But she makes the very cogent remark that it is in her opinion that we should be teaching science to kids as you start with physics, then you move to chemistry, and then you move to biology, as opposed to how we tend to do it in America, where we start with biology, and then we go to chemistry, and then we go to physics. And that's really the wrong way to do it, because physics is the underpins of chemistry. In many ways, you can look at chemistry as applied physics when it comes to the material world. Of course, so is electronics. And then you go into biology, because without chemistry, you can't have biology. So doing that in reverse gear, it kind of gives you the impression that you've got this really complex thing, and we're going to peel a few layers off, and under that complex thing is chemistry, and you're going to peel a few more layers off, and we're going to get down to physics. That really isn't how people think. There's a long-term philosophy in American education that you wanted to teach people from generalities to specifics. So the idea being you'd give somebody a nice broad information on a topic, and then you would get into very specific subjects within that larger framework. And of course, since you already had that firm foundation of the broader topic, you'd be able to pick up the specific stuff like that. Except that's not how humans learn. We learn specifics to generalities. So if you learn how to do one thing and you do it competently, then you go to do another thing and you learn to do it competently. By the time you get to the third thing, you may be suddenly realizing that there are similarities to the third thing you're learning to the first and the second thing. You begin to make the connections. You build the foundation of the general out of understanding and comprehension of the specific. And I think doing biology, chemistry, physics is very much harkening back to that wrong concept that we should be teaching generality to specificity, whereas we should be teaching specificity to generality. Because if you look at physics and you have a good grasp of it, I don't expect you to be, a quantum physicist by the time you finish this book. There's like no math in it. Not that I could do the math anyway, but without the math, you can't get a grasp of, deep physics. That's why I consider myself to be a well-educated layperson when it comes to quantum mechanics. I have some of the broad concepts, but I don't have the math, and I never will. But if you look at physics, and then you then take the next step to look at how those molecules can come together to create, those atoms can come together to create molecules, and the molecules can come together to create functioning enzymes and chemicals and things like that. If you do that, evolution is inevitable. And one of the best examples I could think of that was a book that Asimov wrote on chemistry. I'm never a huge fan of Asimov when it comes to his fiction. I figure he's old-fashioned. He's not woke in any stretch of the imagination, and I don't find his stories to be all that compelling. However, his nonfiction writing is just wonderful. And if you read his book on chemistry, there's like no way you don't end up with life. That's the way he sets it up, and he just lays the situation down. He lays the things down. You follow the path, and you get to where he wants you to go, which is that life is inevitable. So I agree with Angier. I think it's Angier. It's Angier. That's Angier. Or okay, Angier. I'm not sure. I'll never gonna meet her. And I have to agree with her that that makes the most sense. Have somebody understand physics, then have them understand chemistry, and then have them understand biology, and you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, and they're going to have a much deeper understanding of all the topics because they're going to be able to make those connections as they learn each specific thing. They'll begin to see how that physics plays through the entire process, and then you go on to astronomy and you see it some more. So I think it's a good general book. Another reason I wanted to read this is I wanted to find out if this would be a good book for my wife to read. My wife would like to have a broader understanding of science because there are many times when I'll be talking about something and I don't want to have to, bore her to death and explain the background of what I'm trying to say. So if she had a slightly broader, background in the hard sciences as opposed to the humanities, which she has a degree in journalism, I think that she would be able to understand things or things in the world at large and within our conversations a little better because I can be pedantic at times. That will probably cause a shock to some of you out there. But I thoroughly enjoyed the book. Now, the only real downside to this book, I didn't find her writing style delightful. She's competent, but she cannot avoid dad humor. And every time she talks about something, she has a beat where she'll list 2 to 3 things that are pertinent to the topic that she is discussing, and then she'll throw in a dad joke. Da, 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 poof, da, 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 poof. And many of them don't land well. They're not offensive. They're just not necessarily funny either. And she does this a lot. Like every single time that this particular narrative structure might be applicable, as in like you need to give some examples here for the person who's reading this to understand it better, she feels the need to throw in that dad humor at the end. And it just, some of them just don't fall well. So if you can ignore the dad humor, I think the book overall is solid. It's not an overly deep read in any stretch of the imagination. Like I said, there's no math in here. That's going to be very approachable. Stephen Hawking's editor once said that for every formula you put in your book, you're going to cut your readership in half. So I think the only one she ever mentions is E equals MC squared, and that is so absolutely ubiquitous. I don't think most people understand that it is in fact a mathematical formula. So I'd recommend this if you're looking for a good understanding of a broad number of topics to a layperson's depth, maybe a little shallower than that. But definitely, if you read this, you're going to have a better understanding than I think a lot of high school classes will teach you. She does an excellent job here. And I also think that the American education system leaves people flapping in the wind without any real understanding of the world around them. I'm not a big fan of how we teach science. Or most things actually. But yeah, so go read the Canon. I think you'll find it worth your while if you can overlook the dad jokes.